Hi, so I want to talk a little bit about behavioral learning theory. So first of all, we want to take a look at the key learning theories that were presented. Um, the author starts off the chapter by talking about classical conditioning. So there's classical conditioning, instrumental conditioning, and then observational learning. And I'm going to go through all three. So with classical conditioning, how many of you guys remember Pavlov and the dog from Psych 100, right? So what happened with Pavlov? How did he condition the dogs? So first of all, Pavlov paired the dried meat powder with the ringing of a bell, and over time, the dogs were conditioned to respond in a favorable manner, right? So what we want to keep in mind is that marketers can condition consumers in a similar fashion. So am I saying that we as consumers are like dogs? No, never. But I am saying that marketers, through repetition and pairing, can condition consumers to respond in a favorable manner to various brand stimuli. So if we think about the pairing of jingles, the pairing of slogans, the pairing of colors with respect to trademark, we talked in class the other day about like the colors that are used by specific brands. So red, white, and blue for Tommy Hilfiger, or orange and black for Black & Decker. Over time, we associate those colors, or over time, we associate the Nike swoosh with Nike, or the bullseye with Target, and we respond favorably to that stimuli, even when we don't see the Target logo, or even if we don't see the Nike logo. So that would be an example of classical conditioning, right? Also want to talk about instrumental conditioning. So classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning are different primarily because with classical conditioning, the consumer displays a knee-jerk reaction. Relatively involuntary behavior occurs, okay? So there's a knee-jerk reaction that happens. With instrumental conditioning, the consumer engages in a behavior in order to attain a reward or in order to avoid punishment. So with instrumental conditioning, there are three different types of reinforcement that can occur. There's positive reinforcement, in which the consumer receives a reward or benefits because they use a certain product. There's negative reinforcement, so bad things are going to happen to the consumer because he or she didn't make a choice. And then lastly, there's punishment, where there's negative consequences because the consumer made the wrong choice. So the first example that I'm going to talk about would be positive reinforcement. So if we think about Axe commercials, we know in Axe commercials, women are objectified, right? And so we have this guy, and all of a sudden he's being flocked by hundreds of women. They're chasing him down, all because he wore Axe. So, I mean, it's the model that they use, or the storyline that Axe uses, is kind of trite and can be offensive. But yes, this guy is going to be popular because he chose Axe. So again, that's an example of positive reinforcement. An example of negative reinforcement would be where the brand shows the consumer sitting on the couch. He or she is alone on a Friday night, and it's all because they didn't use the right shampoo or conditioner, or they didn't have the right brand, or they didn't use the right fragrance, right? So bad things happen because you didn't choose. Negative reinforcement, if we think about Geico or Allstate, particularly like the Allstate Mayhem commercials. So you're in a ditch, you're stuck on the side of the road, fumes are everywhere, your car is smoking, and they remind us this all happened because you had cut rate insurance, right? That would be an example of punishment. So again, there's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment. The last type of behavioral, or last example of behavioral learning theory, or type of behavioral learning theory that I want to cover is observational learning. So with observational learning, there has to be an attractive model. We must be motivated to pay attention to that model's behavior. And then lastly, we must be motivated to replicate or to repeat or copy the model's behavior. So if we think about celebrities and some of the behaviors that they engage in, a very trivial example, I was walking through the mall the other day and I saw a kiosk for weight trainers, and I couldn't help but think about the Kardashians and how involved they've been in terms of actively promoting waist trainers, right? So consumer may want to adopt a waist trainer or use a waist trainer because they've seen Kim or Chloe or some of the other sisters talk about the benefits of waist training, right? On a more meaningful level, we can also think about celebrities becoming involved or giving back or becoming involved in philanthropic activities. So we know that Jay-Z has been very involved in clean water efforts in third world countries, particularly in Africa. Angelina Jolie has been a UN ambassador, very involved in terms of issues regarding children and adoption and such. We know there are other celebrities in the U.S. that give back to various causes or have been very active and vocal with respect to PETA, the Me Too movement, etc. Right? So maybe perhaps we decide to become more involved in PETA or clean drinking water, or perhaps we take a more active interest in some of the issues that are happening in third world countries, or perhaps right here in America, we become more interested in dealing with or helping to alleviate hunger or poverty, or making people more aware of HIV or AIDS, because we've seen our favorite celebrity or entertainer or athlete become involved. You know, LeBron set up a school recently. Maybe we're more involved or interested in the educational system within the U.S. because we've seen behavior. We've seen LeBron make such great strides in that area. Okay, so all those would be examples of observational learning. So just to summarize, we talked and compared like classical versus instrumental conditioning. With classical, the consumer displays a knee-jerk reaction. With instrumental, the consumer engages in the behavior in order to avoid a reward or in order to attain a reward or avoid punishment. Where observational learning, there has to be an attractive model and the consumer is motivated to replicate their behavior. All right, thank you.